Gentlemen, welcome to another Ukraine war video breakdown. I am Paul. If you're new to the channel, I am a U.S. Army combat veteran, served 12 months in Afghanistan as a platoon leader, personally led over 300 combat patrols, earned a Bronze Star, and most important of all, brought all my soldiers back alive. What I do on this channel is I break down all sorts of videos, but especially right now I've been looking at Ukraine war videos. Now, what I'm going to do, a couple of caveats that I think are important before we get into this. First off, I understand that, and you should understand, that these are real soldiers, real combat, and risking their lives. So when I offer commentary or criticism, just know that it comes from a place of making sure you guys are more informed consumers about and understand what it is that you're seeing. And it's not meant to Monday morning quarterback. But I will say that after every one of our combat patrols, we absolutely engaged in Monday morning quarterbacking. We would talk about what we did well, what we did poorly, and what we need to do better next time, right? And that is how, as a military unit, you get better, is you learn from your operations, improve, and don't make the same mistakes next time, right? So I've done it to myself. And again, I think you'll see I'm pretty like generous, we'll say, or I try to just understand the decision-making process without calling it right or wrong. That said, I've screened this video. It is not graphic, but it does depict real combat operations. So if you're not comfortable with that, you shouldn't probably watch this. It's a viral tank ambush shot from a drone. So there's not a lot of depicted violence. It's you know, done overhead, and it's not, the graphic quality is not super high. Okay. Having said all that, let's get into it. This is, and this is by War Leaks. It's Ukrainian war. Ukrainian soldiers knock out Russian tank with NLAW in point blank ambush. Okay. And you want to check it out. The link is in the description. You absolutely want to support the guys at War Leaks who, whatever else you think of their content, they are preserving what's actually a really important part of history. This is one of the first eras in which a conflict can be documented by the participants in it, to such an extent, right? We've almost never seen this before, except in, you know, Syria, Yemen, and now Ukraine. It really means that future historians will be able to understand the fighting experience so much better than any historian of the past. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so it's telling us that it is a point-blank ambush on a Russian armored column by Ukrainian infantry 10 kilometers north of Bovary. Okay. All right, so they do some dissection at the end. We may or may not cover that. Okay, I actually don't know if this music is copyrighted, so we are just gonna mute it. All right, so this is what we're looking at here is an armored, well, obviously an armored tank column, but specifically it is going to be tanks, right? They're main battle tanks, supported by what are called infantry fighting vehicles. And infantry fighting vehicles are vehicles whose sole purpose, while they are armed, they primarily are meant to shuttle infantry in the battlefield. Exactly what they're doing here. They are allowing the tanks to move forward at the brisk pace of armored combat, but they don't lose their infantry. They don't leave them in the dust. And that's what these vehicles do. They're armored usually. They have some level of armaments, but it's only for self-protection. The idea is that if the tanks get to, say, a dense urban area, they will have infantry that can support them. Okay, so here, and it says NLAW and RPG initiate close ambush. So NLAWs and RPGs are anti-armor weapons. They're rocket-propelled projectiles that are meant to take out heavy armor like these tanks. You can see one scores a hit, and it says one impacts here in the tree line. Right, we watch that happen. Okay, it zooms in, it plays it again. Yep, there's the first, and you can see there's the second probably. And so why, when you have an ambush, right, and an ambush this close is called, they've got the doctrinally correct term in U.S. military parlance, it's called a close ambush. And a close ambush is called that because it's close enough for you, if you wanted to, throw a grenade, right? That's usually the rule of thumb for a close ambush. And when you initiate an ambush, when you ambush someone, you always want to initiate with the biggest shock value weapon. And you want to deal the most damage possible while your enemy doesn't know you're there, right? And so what you have is their largest anti-tank weapons, right? The NLAW and RPG firing simultaneously. That's their most dangerous weapon system, and they use it against the lead tank, and that is to, usually it is because in tighter quarters, right, in a tighter environment, that lead tank could actually become a block and block in the other armored vehicles. In this case, it's a 4-lane highway with a large median. Probably not going to happen, but it does mean that it's a little harder. That lead tank, right, is going to be a little harder to protect. It's a little more out there. Here it is, up close, boom, yep. Okay, it argues the second attack impacts in the tree line. Okay. So, all right, it says Russians react with counterfire while soldiers dismount to avoid fire and get into fighting position. Yep, so you can see right here, the infantry are already starting to dismount out of their vehicles. This looks like a tank crew member who's ditching, but these infantry here in what looks like a unarmored van are already getting out, and they are going to start supporting these tanks, which you notice are very vulnerable. It's hard for them to see. They don't have great vision. They have only these big, powerful armored guns most of the time. And so it's actually hard for a tank like this to deal with a close ambush. It's almost too close to see, sort of like it's hardest to see a shopping cart when it's close to your car. The same thing applies to tanks. So these infantry getting in the fight and helping to return is essential to countering this ambush. Now, well, we'll break it down as they react. We'll talk about their reaction. Okay, so when they talk about counterfire, that's these infantry fighting vehicles. And you can see they have the equivalent of like a US 50 cal, so a very heavy machine gun mounted on them. And while they are pushing out of the kill zone, they are returning fire almost immediately. Now, you may think, how can they find the Ukrainians so quickly? And the answer is they probably don't. They instead are trying to provide suppressive fire. They are simply trying to get to the point where it's not a one-sided fight. Because in these sort of firefight situations, especially when it's close as this, the race is for fire superiority. And whoever can suppress the other, i.e. put down so much fire that the other side cannot even come out over their cover to return fire, right? At some point, you can get that fire suppression and you can begin to tamp down the enemy. You can fix them into place and finish them, right? So the infantry fighting vehicles are just putting rounds downrange to keep the enemy's heads down, to keep them aware, and to let them know that, hey, there's a lot more firepower in this fight than you may have initially thought. They're also, by providing this suppressive fire, they're allowing these infantry to get to cover. And they're going to run to this cover on the far side berm, and then the infantry are going to provide even more firepower to the fight. Yep, the infantry is starting to dismount from their vehicles, and the infantry fighting vehicles are providing covering fire. Yep, they're calling it counterfire. I think of it as covering fire for this dismounting infantry. Okay, so what we have here, you can see here's two tracked infantry fighting vehicles. I was wrong. This isn't like a van. This is a smaller infantry fighting vehicle. And what they are doing is pushing out of the kill zone. So every ambush has a kill zone. And this is set by the ambushers. So the ambushers will, usually their commander, will look at a map and they will say, I think this is a great spot to run an ambush. And so they will say, okay, you're going to position yourselves here, and you are going to ambush this armored column that we think is going to come by. And you're going to start the ambush when the lead vehicle reaches this position. So you can see they probably said that when the lead tank gets to this intersection, you guys are going to initiate the ambush, right? And then the rear of the kill zone is probably up here to the top part of our screen. And that is designated. Everyone will know this is the kill zone, right? So we are going to try to kill everything in this ambush zone. And we're not going to worry about the units to the north or to the south of that kill zone. Or we will worry about them, but only in so much as we don't want them to maneuver on us. We're focusing on destroying what's in the kill zone. And so if you can get out of that kill zone, right? This is a classic example of a kill zone because the terrain is flat. There's no cover. These infantry have dismounted somewhere. And look, there's no protection. There's nothing stopping the Ukrainian forces from engaging them, right? And so they're trying to get out of the kill zone to somewhere with some cover. And that is going to be this field and this area here. It looks like maybe there's a little depression, a little bit of a dip that can give those infantry fighting vehicles some cover, and that the infantry, the dismounted infantry, know, hey, we can get a covered position here and start to return fire. So getting out of the kill zone is the priority. Yep, they talk about this. Also, this tank up here is also beginning to provide covering fire, counterfire, right? So it's using its main gun to put rounds into what it thinks are the Ukrainian positions. Yep, you could see some of these are tank crews dismounting. What sometimes happens is that, remember, tanks are full of ammunition and they are meant to be as compact as possible. So it means the risk of that ammunition catching fire or detonating is high, especially that there's fuel, there's high explosives, and there's people shooting at you, right? That combination is a bad one, and it can produce some really, really, really negative. It can produce secondary explosions as ammunition cooks off, right? Because once one tank shell cooks off and explodes, all the other tank shells are going to be detonated as well. So you want to get as far away from that tank as possible if you can, and not be nearby when it blows up or cooks off. So you can see, okay, so you can see it's discharging a little bit of its what looks like exhaust. So there may actually still be a driver, or this tank may just be rolling to roll. It may just be automatically just sort of rolling along because of damage it's taken. Yep, the tank fires at Ukrainian positions just seconds before being targeted by another warhead. So let's back this up just a little bit. Yep. Okay, so here's the two tanks. They have turned, you notice they have turned towards the original ambush site right here. And the reason they're doing that is, first off, because obviously a tank's side profile is wide, but a tank's front profile is smaller. So it's going to be literally harder to hit them. But also, tanks are designed to fight turret forward. So they have the most armor facing to the front. And that is what they've done. They've turned their strongest armor towards the ambush site and are putting rounds downrange. Boom. You see the power of these tank shells, right? They literally just carve a hole right through this area. And this is one of the dangers of a close ambush, is you see how close they are to enemy fire, to enemy counterfire. And it can be a really, really dangerous situation when you are taking fire this close from weapons this powerful. And again, is it clear? It is not clear that the tanks have a super precise dialed in location of the Ukrainian forces, but they are definitely, absolutely scaring the bejesus out of them, because this is some intense firepower coming down on their position. Yep, so you can see another rocket has hit. It's not clear that this has done a ton of damage to the tank. It may have penetrated the armor, it may not have, but they've hit the tank where it is most protected, its front. Yep, and this is the cook-off we were talking about. This is their fuel starting to ignite and some of their ammunition starting to ignite and other flammable components in the tank starting to ignite. Yep, so you can see this tank keeps engaging Ukrainian positions. Let's see if there's another fire from this tank as well. Oh, we don't have it. Okay. But what you've seen actually what impresses me first off, the Ukrainian forces did a textbook close ambush. Is it a little close for, it's a little rich for my blood, certainly, to get that close to tanks. But, tanks are designed to engage at pretty far distances. So it's possible that the tanks may actually be too close for the tanks to effectively return fire. Though, as we've seen, that didn't look like the case. It looked like that tank rounds were able to engage. But it's hard to tell from this perspective. In Chechnya, Russian tanks had a problem where they could not get a declination in their turrets. Their turrets would go, let's say, to even or just a few degrees below horizontal, below level, and that's the furthest they could fire, which meant that their rounds could actually have this gap between them and the ground if you attacked them at close distances. So it's possible that that tank counterfire may actually be going over the heads of Ukrainians. Again, not super clear, right? So they may actually have been watched these tank rounds pass overhead, but it's possible too that the Russians fixed this problem after Chechnya and now have tanks whose turrets can fire and engage targets much, much closer. The other thing that, they deserve some credit for is, again, their site selection was pretty good. You see they have concealment. Those trees form cover. I think if there was foliage, it would be even harder to get a sense of the Ukrainian positions, and it would be easy to hit and withdraw. And that may have been the plan, just to hit them and withdraw, because light infantry cannot take on a tank, an armored column like that. But again, I don't know what the plan was, but their positioning was great. Their process of engagement was awesome. Their commitment to starting with their most casualty producing weapon and then engaging with other weapon systems. The thing that I would say was, it also impressed me a lot, actually, was how organized the response of the Russian troops was. You notice almost every person in that convoy knew what they had to do. The tank crew of the hit tank started to bail, right? Even the tank that was destroyed and still rolling, you notice it had a sister tank that stayed with it, right? So that it wouldn't be stuck outside, isolated and alone, right? So that tank stayed with it. Two tanks immediately began to pivot and return counterfire, right, by turning their armored front towards the enemy. The infantry dismounted. The infantry fighting vehicles immediately returned fire and maneuvered back, right? This was an automatic drill, something that they had almost certainly trained extensively before their deployment. And it's a testament to the fact that either this was a exceptional unit or this is a unit that's learned the hard way. It's possible that these guys have been in a lot of armor ambushes, and if you don't respond right, you end up as one of the destroyed tanks on CNN. So it's possible that just by attrition, by the hardest learning curve, the combat learning curve, they have evolved this very, very coherent response to an ambush. Okay, the additional context is why they think this is an NLAW. It shows, right, this is how an NLAW. It's pretty fascinating. You can see the round actually explodes and shoots straight down into the tank, bypassing that powerful front armor. Right, it has a very distinct sort of mushroom cloudy weapon explosion. And they point out that it's very similar. Yeah, there it is. And then they find the location where they think it happened. And this is probably the intersection where the tanks were moving down. And the Ukrainians engaged. You can see, again, I'll be the first to tell you, I find this to be a little too, again, too close for my comfort, a little too rich for my blood, right? This is where they argue the first two Ukrainian shooters were engaging them. Yeah, for me, I don't know if I would want to fight tanks at this distance. But I guess it's like, if you have to get anti-tank kills, you have to get them somehow, and this is how you do it, right? So yeah, they point out that this is the ambush site here, and yeah, they deserve some credit again for this decision to push into these fields. Yeah, you know what? This is probably honestly the best ambush site. Because look, if you were to position anywhere here, there's no cover. You're sitting ducks, right? The tanks will target you and they will finish you off. Here, you have withdrawal routes. You can withdraw through the tree line here. You can withdraw through the village here. Though the thing that I think they did not anticipate is that, again, in the winter, there's no cover here. You can see through trees often pretty clearly. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me for this. If you have other kind of Ukraine combat videos that you want me to check out and they're not too graphic, let me know. And other than that, thanks for watching. Do check out War Leagues. You can see the original. I intentionally kept this one on a third of the screen, just again to minimize the amount of like graphic violence and maximize me breaking things down. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.